I'd like to start
Okay.
while you're looking for those, if that's all right, with Dan Moriarty. You talked about the thorium-rich areas in SPA being potential mantle materials. Couple of things. Can you expand a little bit on the idea that these are from the mantle, and what about them being Imbrium impact ejector? Does that cloud your conclusion there?
Yeah, so this is something we went into in pretty substantial detail in the two papers that I included references to in the slides. So Imbrium antipodal ejecta is one of the primary kind of competing hypotheses for the mantle ejecta model. We found that didn't really make sense with the, kind of the geological structure of the thorium anomaly in SPA. So when people discuss the antipodal ejecta, they're primarily talking about the two hotspots people see at Birkeland and Eresme V. But what we found is that these aren't two kind of discrete emplacements. So they're part of kind of a wider series of other kind of second tier local maxima that are also associated with similarly sized and similarly aged impact structures around this region. So it seems to be much more of a kind of a large scale emplacement directly associated with SPA, as opposed to kind of a smaller area discrete emplacement from Imbrium. And in terms of it being defined as mantle, so I mean it's an interesting definition. We essentially considered and defined in the papers mantle to be anything beneath the plagioclase flotation crust. So we're including the kind of late stage cumulate sandwich that you get between the kind of sinking mafic cumulates and the floating plagioclase cumulates. But there can be some further discussion about how you exactly define those layers as mantle versus something else.
It's a bit unconventional, but the moon is not a conventional beast. So and I get the hint that I need to read your papers. I get that. So the hint has been taken. So anything in the chat?
Yeah, so there were a few comments and slash questions about communication satellites, and I actually thought I'll jump in with an answer, and then if anyone else has something to add, because we haven't really talked about this extensively today. We're discussing a lot of far side deliveries and investigations. But what do we do about a COMSAT? So at least on the NASA side, I'll just say that we are pursuing multiple lines of communications relays in parallel, rather than relying on someone else to do it for us. That's really about all I can say at this moment. I don't know if that is comforting or not, but if anyone, I know we had a comment I think from about Intuitive Machines. I don't know if it was from Intuitive Machines. I'm trying to find it again.
I made that comment, I think.
Okay, yeah, about they might be testing some comms relays as well. So hopefully there will be some options. Obviously, I don't have a one I can hand you right here, right now, but.
What about this thing called Gateway? Is that an option?
Question. I'm not the best person to speak to Gateway. I don't know if anyone on here.
Oh, I don't think. Yeah.
That was a bit not before 2025. At the earliest, I think.
That sounded like Marshall.
It is. I posted also on Intuitive Machines. They've told me that if their IM2 launch, they're going to have a comms test communications relay. If that works, they plan to do it on every subsequent landing. Like, for example, they just got Rainer Gamma. And so they want to build up over time a communications network. I mean, I'm just relaying what they've told me. So, that means maybe by 2024, so there might be something that's pretty usable.
Well, fingers crossed. So,
I mean, I think they know what they're doing. So, that's encouraging.
It's encouraging, but the proof of the pudding is in the landing and in the setting up of the COMSATs. So, it's we still need a win.
There's some good chatter in the chat as well about SPA campaign science, and I've seen a few comments about sample return, and probably not fully just relevant to SPA, but like how expensive is it? What is the value of, where'd it go? The relative worth of different types of sample, bulk samples versus, I had it and it jumped again. So, but anyway,
I think the value of the sample return, we need to sort of do a costing, because I think Tim actually can talk to this, because his campaign at Aristarchus looks like an evolvable campaign. You start off with a static lander, you bring some regolith back, and then you go to mobility required. Tim, you wanna talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I'll reiterate that for each of the 3 landing sites we chose, we put in sample return as enhancing science, right? So I want to reiterate that. I think we can do a lot at this site, at least, without sample return. And I think there are other places where you could probably make a better case where sample return is needed for kind of the baseline, science objectives. But when we were kind of thinking about the Aristarchus campaign, we were thinking in terms of let's start simple and get more complicated as we move forward. And so, start with kind of a low slope, relatively low rock area where we can do some great science just with a lander. You don't need mobility because everything is relatively homogeneous at the kind of remote sensing scale. And then, get harder as we learn more and the Prism or the CLPS providers become more capable, right? So, and I think, if you started, soliciting for a 3-mission campaign around now, if we were kind of a decade out or so by the time of the 3rd campaign, then maybe sample return at that point becomes more of a reality, both in terms of engineering capability and in terms of cost.
Yeah, I think the cost issue was what more complicated sample returns may price it out of CLPS. And that's why, coming back to the session earlier this morning, this idea of actually defining the science that can be done within the CLPS paradigm, and the plans to evolve that paradigm need to be laid out so we know what the boundaries are. So there's no, we know what can be proposed to Discovery. We know what can be proposed to New Frontiers, because it just doesn't fit within CLPS.
I strongly agree with all of the people who are making comments this morning that kind of an overarching strategy document would be super helpful and very good for the game.
Yeah.
Well, Clive, one of the paradigms of CLPS, of course, is to allow the commercial sector to find ways to do things that maybe NASA has found to be too expensive. And so, the sample return, I think we'll see innovations that make it possible.
Absolutely agree with you, Brad. And I think that actually forcing the commercials to think this way is where the next task order needs to go, and it needs to be evolved because of demand from the customer. So I presume we're the customer here.
But I have to say that I think the commercial
customers.
people will only do sample return if they think they're going to get paid for it.
Oh yeah,
So,
money talks for sure.
If NASA even said we'll award $15 million for this, I'm just picking a number, for the first sample return, they might get somebody to take them up on that.
Yeah.
One of the things that Clive and others have pointed out time and time again, though, is that samples are the gift that keeps giving. In other words, we've been working with samples for 50 years and we keep finding new things. So I think making a big push for even a simple sample return or multiple simple, and as experience is gained, there are several sites I'm sure we could identify that even just a grab sample would be great and would be studying it for decades. So let's not give up on samples just because it can be complex. Let's start with something simple and just get more of them.
Well, I agree with Carly. I don't think sample return is necessarily, outside of the scope of CLPS at this point. You know, again, we got to cost things out, look at capabilities and how far in the future they are, but certainly definitely worth keeping on the table to discuss.
It's part of the evolution strategy, I think, is to see how far it can go.
Exactly.
And get people to, you know, people out there that have new ideas, as Brad said, becomes very important. But as you know, money talks. Money
But when I
talks.
see MSL Perseverance filling those little tiny tubes with Martian samples, I have to admit I've been thinking, could you get those tubes? You know, how much would NASA pay for one of those tubes filled up on the moon and brought back?
Probably not as
Presumably
much
they're
as they pay
sealed.
for the ones from Mars. So
Well, but they're doing it. That's all in house, right? So that's not.
yeah. Anything else in the chat, Ryan or Rael? Do you see anything in there?
I don't see any additional.
Okay. Okay. Brad, coming back to SPA, the New Frontiers concept was one mission to bring things back, and you're suggesting multiple missions now to do that. And if I listen to you correctly, you don't need precision landing, but you do need hazard avoidance, right?
Well, one could argue, you know, it's a percentages game. We have such good imaging of the surface in South Pelican Basin, many potential landing sites with LROC narrow angle camera images. You can see the boulders. I mean, you can find places where it's perfectly safe to land in, you know, much larger than 100-meter locations. But to really get the kind of surety, you know, that we want to have, 100 meters allows you to do great hazard avoidance within those images and locations, but also terrain relative navigation. You know, we saw this with the, not TRN, but we saw good hazard avoidance with the Shonga landers. And it's good to be able to not put one of your landing legs into a big crater, or I mean, you know, any kind of crater. So, so that's important. But let me come back to your other point about multiple missions. And I see some chatter see something in the chat about ARTEMIS. One of the ideas for CLPS would be to have a mission that would complement an ARTEMIS sample return that's going to, you know, we're going to be at the South Pole, and that's the southern rim of SPA. So getting then a CLPS mission to the interior of the basin, simple sample return, you know, that would just be phenomenal. Two locations, one on the exterior and one in the interior. And of course, Dan's locations get you into the thorium anomaly and potentially deep-seated material.
I think it kind of spills into, I'll just real quick and we'll wrap it up. Comment Barb just made in the chat, and you know, she argued that random soil samples may not be the most useful, and that she would challenge the providers to look carefully at what science we're trying to accomplish with the samples. And that kind of made me think exactly of, you know, SPA interior. You know, let's say we had a CLPS delivery to the SPA interior, we may want to have some way to communicate. I mean, granted, theoretically, we'd have, you know, somebody in the community leading this instrument suite that was grabbing the samples. But yeah, there would have to be some kind of communication with the providers and coordination of, you know, we can't just grab any old sample because it might not be the one that actually answers our science question. So
it's definitely what science question you trying to answer, and is that sample going to be sufficient to do that? And that's the basic concept behind CLPS sample return. It's and that's a lot of science questions that are out there in the community documents point that out.